Welcome everybody to this wonderful to be masterclass. My name is Samuel Tetner. I'm a PhD student at the Granada Centre for Visual Anthropology. And this is an exciting collaboration that we're starting. It's the first one with MAL. This series of masterclasses are meant to address particular skills that perhaps we as anthropologists and social scientists don't learn about in a particular program. So in the Granada Centre, for example, there's a lot of resources to do traditional documentary, but there's a particular lack of resources if you want to do any type of social science or anthropological research using more interactive techniques, more immersive techniques, more experimental, more creative methods, research methods. So to try to address that lack, we are doing different master classes. The one that we're doing today is with Mary Matheson. Mary is she's an expert in the immersive reality, virtual reality, and extended reality fields, and she's done a lot of work as well with different communities and for social and political and cultural reasons. So I won't go much into that because Mary's gonna introduce herself and she's gonna tell us about her work.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to meet some anthropologists who are interested in bringing immersive into your work. I'm a massive immersive and VR evangelist. So I'm super excited that this is a whole new group of people who are interested in immersive techniques and how you can use them for your work. So there you go, that's me. So at the moment I've actually just taken a job with Arizona State University as a professor of practice, setting up a new center for narrative and emerging media in actually Los Angeles, which is a kind of strange thing. I know you guys are from all over the world, which is also really cool and exciting. But, you know, in the States, universities sometimes set up centers in cities where they obviously have a speciality. So LA, clearly the film school is there, and also they're setting up this new immersive center, and I'm going to be working with Noni de la Peña there. I don't know if you guys know of her, but if you don't, then you should check out her work. She's also comes from a sort of journalistic and documentary tradition, and is actually known as the godmother of VR. She was one of the real pioneers in this industry, so she's definitely worth looking up. And so she and I are going to be launching this center there, and I'll tell you a bit more about that later. So I'm obviously an immersive director, and I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I'm also a journalist. That's really my sort of origins. So just quickly to let you know, oops, 1 second. There we go. So my journalism started off really in Latin America. I was in Venezuela and then in Colombia during the sort of mid-90s. And I reported there on the drug wars and also the guerrilla war. So that's kind of how I cut my teeth. I started off actually as a writer and a radio journalist, and didn't really get into TV until I came back to the UK, and I started making documentaries for Impact. So I've done a lot of work around girls' rights and girls' education in particular, and worked with organizations like the UN, obviously, and Plan International, Save the Children. And you can see I did quite a bit of work around Malala, especially because that's the sort of period I was working there and when Malala spoke at the UN. But one of the things, and this is kind of why I became more interested in virtual reality, is that I was constantly looking for new ways to sort of tell these stories. That kind of brought me basically to virtual reality in 2016, when I was asked to direct a 360 film in Sierra Leone for Plan International. And, you know, what was really extraordinary for me as somebody who'd sort of basically reported on or made films in sort of countries outside of the US and the UK, was that, you know, I was constantly trying to make this connection between the audience and the characters, and trying to, you know, make connections, whether that's emotional or just get people to sort of understand where you know, other people have come from and what they, you know, what their lives are like. And I was always really keen on, you know, not necessarily me interpreting for other people. So when virtual reality came along, it was really fascinating, because I suddenly realized that actually, instead of, you know, bringing a character from another country into the UK or the United States, we could bring our audiences to that other country. And, you know, it suddenly we realized that there was this ability to really take you somewhere else and create an emotional connection and make you feel as if you're actually there. So I was sort of working on this first one, and it was this first film was for a fundraising dinner, which is kind of interesting as well in itself, I think. But it really had a huge impact on the people that watched the films, and you can see they were just using little Google Cardboards. And you know, they managed to raise, Plan International managed to raise more money at that dinner than they had in previous ones, and they think it was because of the VR. So it's kind of interesting that for those of you, I know a lot of you are kind of interested in VR for impact and how it can be used, and we can sort of dig a bit deeper into why that is, and later on, once we sort of start discussing everything. After that, I went on to work for Google, just on a series that was about young female role models, basically in different areas. So these were women who were sort of breaking barriers in different areas of work. So you can see that we had Gina Rodriguez, the actress, an environmental entrepreneur, an aerospace engineer working for Boeing and NASA, Ibtihaj Mohammed, the first Muslim woman to wear a hijab representing the United States at the Olympics, and so on. So, you know, this is when VR really starts to take off as a medium, and particularly as a documentary form, it's very interesting. And you know, the big tech companies start to realize that they've obviously got another audience, which we could, or a larger audience that goes beyond you know, YouTube on its own. You've got YouTube VR, and I'm sure you all know about Meta and Facebook now. That's really sort of transformed things again. But I also started to use different techniques, and this is another thing that sort of VR allows you to do, which is to bring in other animation and really play with the form. So in the bottom, you can see that I've composited Gina Rodriguez 4 times in this shot, and so you can really sort of play around with you know, visuals and be creative in a way that kind of is sort of lets you loose really in a 360 space compared to, you know, regular 16:9. And this is the camera that I use quite a lot in the left-hand image. So again, I know some of you are sort of asking about impact. So I just wanted to tell you that you know, the way that we launched this series was on YouTube VR, although you could also watch it just on a you know, any computer. And it did have a really huge effect. Actually, we were kind of surprised at how many people watched it. So Vidya Vox in particular, that she's this amazing Indo-American singer, and she has a lot of followers, and a lot of them watched her film, basically. So we kind of went cross-platform, and that was hugely effective. And then this is something that we started to sort of move into that might be interesting for you guys as well, which is that instead of just having 360 film, you know, just an image, we started using game engine technology, which is used, you know, where you actually create an environment as opposed to capture it in film. And it's kind of interesting for you guys maybe because, you know, we used this as a way to sort of create portals, so like little windows or doors where you as the viewer can sort of pass through it into another world or into another scene, but it's like walking into another world, basically. And so suddenly, you know, the technology all the time, it's changing and enabling you to you know, create an even greater sense of presence for your audience as they sort of enter a different world or a different scene in VR. And this is a film that I made. I was working with a Yazidi NGO in northern Iraq, and this is actually Nadia Murad, the Nobel Prize winner's house. You can see the little ghost figures that we created, and this was something that this group Yazda has used this VR experience to lobby and advocate for the genocide against the Yazidis by ISIS to be declared a genocide. So again, this is you know, this is being used as a sort of for impact, as we're calling them, campaign. So again, I can talk to you guys more about that later on if you're interested in it, but it's just, I've sort of been taken aback really by how much this has been used and the effect that it's had. So it's been used not just for advocacy, you know, in Europe in particular, but also even within Iraq and Kurdistan, where it's shown to non-Yazidis to sort of, you know, as a form of peace building between communities, so that non-Yazidis can see what actually happened. Obviously not in detail, but you know, they get a sense of what happened to the Yazidis during that attack. And I've actually got a little bit here, but again, I don't really want to show it to you yet unless you're interested. So maybe in a bit we can always watch it. If you guys are interested, I can show you a little bit more about it. But I just kind of wanted to introduce you a few, you know, different bits and bobs that I've worked on, so that you know, you get a sense of my history really. So this the experience was also part of a touring exhibition with Yazidi artwork, and we incorporated that artwork actually into the VR experience. And again, you know, it's had the sort of social media, the strategy of using, you know, an exhibition along with the VR, along with social media, can have quite a huge impact. You know, if you're using cross-platform campaigning. I just wanted to introduce this to you guys as well, because this was actually something that I didn't work on, but it was it's produced by a company that I do a lot of work with called Surround Vision, and it's kind of relevant to the next project that I worked on. And it's about the Great Green Wall. I don't know if any of you know about it, but it's this incredible, you know, line of trees and hedges that's sort of going across the width of Africa. It's like 8,000 kilometers, and it's a way of stopping desertification. And so this VR film was shown at one of the UN climate summits, COP21. You know, to try and raise awareness and to try and raise money again, as also for this project. So $4 billion was raised for the project. So, you know, again, it sort of had a huge impact on, you know, top level government ministers who then committed to pledging money towards this campaign. So that project kind of led us into a deeper and wider project, which we called A Brighter Future, where we wanted to try and show audiences that they could do something. I think there was a lot of, you know, a lot of people felt like there was nothing that we can do, you know, that climate change is happening, it's really overwhelming, everything's terrible. And we kind of wanted to show that actually there are people out there with solutions, and there is something that we can do, and we wanted to showcase those. So this was a little series that we wanted to create, and this went to COP26 in Glasgow. And now you can see again, we're becoming much more interactive in how we're sort of in the type of VR experiences that I'm making. So, you know, again, we were using this technique of sort of maybe stepping through a portal into another world, but we also wanted to create this kind of a cool kind of setup where, you know, you as the viewer, you can see this person in the red as the viewer, and they've got this sort of scene in front of them where they've got various screens. They've got a map of Colombia. This is a film that I made about Medellin and Colombia and the sort of greening of Medellin. You know, you've got a 16:9 film over on the left. There's a 360 film on the right, and you as the viewer can select what you want to watch and what you want to listen to and what do you want to read. So it's this almost like a sort of jukebox of experiences. And I think this is like a little, yeah, this is like a little film. So this is the film about that we showed at COP, about the experience, not the actual experience. So you can see it's sort of, you know, you've suddenly got access to all kinds of people, whether they are, you know, high-level government ministers or, you know, the general public. We had kids in there viewing this, and they equally had delegates. So, you know, I think that's been the biggest sort of learning for all of us, you know, in the years that I've been making this. You know, we've learned that really you can sort of hit anyone at any level or any, you know, any community. It's a really powerful medium. This is another series that I did. Actually, this was during COVID, and I wanted to talk about this because very briefly again, but just to introduce it, because we co-created these films with these young women. So it was about young female activists around the world, 10 different women, young women. And I know a lot of you are kind of interested in community engagement, and it's something that I'm really interested in, which is co-creating with the characters. So actually, since I began making VR, I tend to always co-create with the people who are in the films, to give them some sort of agency over what's being said about them, what they want to say, and also I think it brings you know, it brings an authenticity to the voice that is you know, very palpable, which I think you guys might be interested in, and also you know, you often hear stories that maybe, you know, you wouldn't have heard if it was just my interpretation of what was, you know, what the story is. So, you know, I think it's a really fascinating way to make documentaries, and, you know, it doesn't come without problems. But it's really kind of my methodology now, and I know some of you are very interested in that kind of work as well, so I thought I'd quickly introduce this. So that series was called New Realities, and it was for Lenovo, actually, interestingly, a tech company. So now I'm working on another probably series, although it's just we've really just been commissioned to make one film at the moment, which is about the next rocket to go to the moon, which NASA is hoping to launch, I think, later this summer. But it'll be the first of a series of 3 rockets, and the third one is, you know, they plan to land a woman on the moon for the first time. So we kind of want to tell this story in an interactive way, and using VR as well as AR. And you can kind of see what we're trying to do is think about how the audience of the future might watch this. And, you know, you can see we've got a regular TV screen there, but then, you know, one of the girls has got a phone. You can't quite see her mum has got, you know, AR glasses on, and it means that the experience is enhanced. So you're not just watching a 16:9 two-dimensional film. You could also choose to watch some three-dimensional assets as well, if you want to. Just to let you know, I then started, I've sort of generally been, you know, doing mentoring, and then started actually sort of teaching an MA at the same time as directing. So, and I started off in Royal Holloway on the masters that I set up a master's in immersive storytelling, and then as I said at the beginning, I literally just moved, started working with Arizona State University. And, you know, what's interesting about this for me, and maybe for some of you as well, is that, again, it's Arizona State University is very keen to diversify who is creating and distributing virtual reality and you know, stories using other emerging media as well. So that was kind of one of the reasons that I was very drawn to them, as was Noni de la Peña, as I said. So that is it, I think, for me. I think I did put I've got my details there, but maybe I can add those at the end. So I think that's it. I'm just going to exit, and then maybe we can hear from someone else. Cool. So that was a little bit of a romp, but you guys get, you know, at least it gives you a little bit of an idea of what I'm doing. So who would like to start? Would somebody like to start and say a little bit about what they're doing, and, you know, what intrigued you about this masterclass? Maybe shall I choose somebody? Okay, cool. Is it Liza or Lisa Fletcher?
Hi, hello, Mary. I'm Lisa Fletcher. Do you just want a brief introduction from me about my level and experience? I made a VR documentary last year in a social housing estate in Leytonstone, East London. It was my first experience of working in this way, and I got a UCL East engagement grant because I'm based in Waltham Forest, and of course the UCL new campus is in Stratford, East London, and it was a way of engaging with the community there. I was making a regular documentary anyway, but I wanted to add new technologies to engage with younger people, and I'm also very intrigued about the role that VR and new media has to play in archiving our history and showing our contemporary life. I'm one of your people who's interested in community engagement as well. So I work very closely with, you know, the mainly working class community in the estate to have a great say in collaboration and how they wanted to come across on screen. And I guess, you know, I'm interested in this hashtag of VR for good, using VR in an anthropological way to present our way of being in the world. Is that enough?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I've actually read all of your, you know, I know why you're all here, I think, but it's really good to hear from each of you as well. And it's more for each of you know, for you to hear from each other, because it's quite a small group, which is really great, because it means we can really sort of dig deep into what you're looking for. So it'd be, you know, there might be particular areas that you're really interested in, Lisa, as well, that will be good for us to talk about. So who else? How about John Tenney?
Thank you, Mary. Hello, everyone. My name is John Tenney. I'm originally from Texas, but I'm currently based in Montreal, Canada. I work for a US-based operating foundation, and we work closely with our partner NGO in Malawi to do kind of holistic and sustainable community projects. And on the side, we do a lot of kind of like new multimedia stuff. Last year, I produced a virtual reality web-based virtual reality immersive experience that had 360 video that I shot in Malawi that was kind of showing different aspects of our programs, but then also like kind of telling stories about people's lives. Yeah, we did quite well with that. And currently I'm in the process of creating a new standalone version of that for like a game engine to run on the Oculus that will involve a lot more, hopefully, expansive, immersive storytelling from Malawi, and then to kind of package that so that people can see it more widely.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. It'll be really interesting to talk to you as well about how you engage the community and what you're doing, because I know that's really important to your organization. So cool. How about Orlando?
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here. I am based in Irvine, California right now. And I'm in the third year of my doctoral program. So I'm about to begin my field research, which is going to last about a year and a half. And I had planned to do a short documentary. So when this came up, I thought, oh, that would be a good opportunity to kind of explore some other options. And I've done work with artists on art installations and video. And last year we had the task under COVID to put one of our art installations online. We ended up going with a more kind of like, old school web model. But I am interested in the VR space and how it works and the mechanics of it. I know very little about it. But also I guess the politics of representation. One issue we had, one reasons we didn't go right into the VR space, other than just like time and money, is we were concerned about representing like deep social issues in a space that would look too video gaming. Like we had issues with that, and I'm just wondering how folks are working with that, the medium, the limitations, associations with the medium itself.
Well, that's cool. Okay, I'm going to take a note of that because I think that would be really interesting, because I want to ask you more about what you're meaning. But let's just hear what everyone else is up to. What about Claire Fitch?
Hi, I'm Claire. I'm in Texas right now. I'm a geographer, actually, studying VR as sort of a way of thinking about the affordances and limitations of the medium to create a sense of being in place or immersion, particularly in sort of like creating an arena for a renegotiation or contemplation of human environment relationships. So right now I'm working on a project with a couple of anthropologists here in Austin, thinking about what can be done with a land acknowledgement in VR. And so we approached this idea originally trying to expand out the practice of land acknowledgement from what in the States at least is usually pretty confined to like one sentence at the beginning or end of an email or talk, and thinking about what this sort of embodied or immersive medium can do to extend the reach of this practice. So a big part of this is thinking about what Orlando was just speaking of, the politics of representation, and what it means to be using this technology of VR in Austin, the city that's like this very fast growing center of techno-capitalism, to represent histories here that have been erased or obfuscated through time. What sort of it means to like bring or foreground these stories through this technology. And also sort of this like fun play with thinking about what it means to do a land acknowledgement of a place you're not in, as like a way that people have been practicing on Zoom. I think we've seen through the pandemic, but knowing that our viewer will be standing in a place on a piece of land different from the one that we're speaking of. And so thinking about the opportunities here to sort of expose the vast like network of places folks are interconnected with in their use of these new technologies.
So fascinating. Will you just briefly tell, because not everybody here might be aware of what land acknowledgement is, just because we're such an international group.
Yeah, totally. So land acknowledgement in the States, at least, is meant to sort of foreground or give respect to the histories of indigenous land claims in a place of land that you're speaking from or speaking about. And so normally, as I mentioned, these sort of end up being like a litany or like a list of folks that have lived or have had histories in a land throughout time, that is just sort of paying homage to the fact that there's a presence there that has been erased or displaced through time.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Yeah, really interesting. I'm so excited to talk to you all about what you're doing. How about Ezgi? Is that how you say your name?
Yes, correct. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Ezgi Sönmez. I'm originally from Istanbul, Turkey, and I'm based in Brighton, UK. I studied masters at UCL Anthropology, and during my work, when I was conducting a research about how to live with mortality awareness, I wanted to produce a film with no prior experience that shows my non-linear stages of grieving and healing. I call it as an auto-ethnographic film, and it was shown at the VR exhibition of Multimedia Anthropology Lab, New York University, and some other exhibitions in the UK. And then after graduating from UCL, I'm a founder and director of a qualitative research company in the UK. And it is called See Beyond Research, and we see ethnography as our background, but we also try to use photography, filmmaking, VR, sound, as long as the projects allow. So I'm here to improve my skills and integrate creative strategies in the business. And also at the moment, I'm evaluating some PhD offers, and I'm only evaluating the programs that allow me to integrate these into academic work, because I no longer feel any interest in only written work that's going to stay in academia and that's not going to access the wider audience. So thank you.
Interesting, how exciting. Cool, Beryl.
Hi, everyone. I'm based in Istanbul, Turkey. Hi, Ezgi. So my background is actually development. I'm a humanitarian and development worker. So I worked in active conflict affected space such as Baghdad or Syria, and I worked stabilization work mainly. Although I studied film, but I found like that was very well needed area to work back in that time. But in the past 4 years, I'm filming ethnographic stories for UN agencies. So what I found missing is all the stories that we're filming is just like staying on YouTube, or they're showing for their donor events and there are no interaction, although like they're aiming social cohesion mainly. So what I want to do is I want to use VR and other interactive storytelling methods to preserve this cultural heritage for people like who needed like a flip their home otherwise, because otherwise it will be forgotten. So and also like I want to use those storytelling methods for social cohesion, because in Turkey like currently we have a huge hate towards refugees and also like other ethnic minorities. So
yeah, I think that's the case in many countries actually. Yeah, a lot of hostility towards refugees. Danny.
Thank you. Sorry, I apologize for popping in and out. I'm doubling up for childcare duties right now, so sorry for when I disappear. I'm here kind of in with two kind of interests. So I provide teaching on kind of a couple courses that teach ethnographic methods, but more particularly that teach digital research methods and that look at using film. Even though our department isn't here at Cambridge isn't really known for ethnographic film. So I'm really just interested in exploring what the possibilities are there, if not for my own research, to make my students aware of these sorts of possibilities. That's kind of one vein. I'm also interested, I kind of do some more applied work in kind of UX research, and I'm interested in seeing what kind of possibilities might be in a more applied sense. So I'm really interested in learning more about the actual kind of apparatuses you use and kind of how intrusive they are, how the process, how your kind of media creation process goes, kind of the more practical side of your what would be field work for us, but your kind of documentary kind of creation process goes. So maybe more banal interests for me, but yeah, that's me.
Yeah, not at all. No, and that will be really easy to talk about, and it's like a methodology, kind of an area around methodology. Absolutely. Who else? Aladdin.
Hi. Yes, I'm originally from Switzerland and I'm calling at the moment from London. And I'm an artist, mostly working on interspecies relationship between humans and bees, but I also have a background in visual anthropology. So I think my interest to be here today was more about first like keeping up a bit with the field of anthropology and how it is itself keeping up with VR and new technology, but I also have an interest for work that I would do myself maybe in the future, even though I've never worked with VR so far. But I would be interested to use it maybe to represent non-human words or to think about this as a tool for that. But that's I don't have much to bring about an experience with VR itself.
Cool. Yeah, and also I've got a list of some resources that I'll send to Sam to send on to you guys afterwards of, different technologies that you can use that could be interesting for you guys. Shirley.
Hi everyone, I'm Shirley. I'm from Holland originally, doing also the PhD Visual Anthropology at University of Manchester, and currently in my fieldwork period in Sardinia, Italy. So that's where I'm tuning in from now, where I do research on depopulating towns that are kind of in the process of sometimes extinction. And then that kind of leaves a space for new things. So I'm looking at refugees who are being placed there, but also kind of other initiatives that happen in these places, sometimes a bit bizarre initiatives. And I've decided in this period that I'm going to be making as an output a documentary film, quite kind of not immersive per se, just whatever normal means, and a board game. And the board game, I'd like to think of it as a kind of really low-tech immersive experience. So I think from that kind of angle, I'm interested for this masterclass, to kind of keep up with technology and top up, kind of be in the loop on things. So also the tools that you use, etc., even if I'm not using them for this project. And then secondly, kind of talks around the considerations when creating immersive experiences. And probably last, sort of the value of these kind of immersive experiences within research beyond sort of a wider reach, beyond just communication, but also, what's the quality of that experience in understanding the research insights.
Yeah, interesting. I was really interested in that you were talking about gameplay as well, which I thought was kind of fascinating as well. So we can definitely, bring that into the discussion. Now I can see, is it Darding? I can't see you, but can you speak? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm originally from China, and I moved to London to do a master program at UCL. So currently I'm studying creative documentary. So I saw this event on the LinkedIn linking page, and I'm really interested because I can see that there's like a lot of new potentials, how the VR and also other immersive new technology, new media can bring to like a traditional like storytelling. And I'm really interested to learn more about this.
Oh, thank you. Sam, do you want to talk about what you're doing as well? Or does, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Samuel, I'm from Venezuela originally. I'm doing a PhD in visual anthropology at Manchester. As an anthropologist, I'm an anthropologist of religion, and I've done research about the connection between sounds and movement and religious experience or spiritual experience. First in Islam, and I did ethnography in Turkey, in India, and Pakistan. And now I'm working with New Age spiritual people and like secular spiritual people in Europe, Western Europe. So I'm doing my research like Shirley right now in Barcelona, Spain. And I'm also an artist and documentary maker. I've done, like Shirley said, a normal documentary, and I've done other more traditional media outputs. And I've also I'm getting into curation, so I've curated 2 art exhibitions. The last one was about multi-species ethnographies and multi-species relationship, like maybe what Aladdin is working on. And now what I want to work on, and the reason why I'm here, is that I want to move towards more interactive, immersive methods, particularly because of the importance of sound to religion and to religious experience. I want to work with immersive sound installations or immersive sound websites, and I want to learn more about that, immersive sound. And I also just want to collaborate. I want to create community, and I want to know what other people are doing, and I want to work on meaningful things with others. So that's another reason I'm here.
And is Rafaela, would she like to say something too?
I think, yeah, she's doing something very, very interesting. I don't know if she's around.
She's maybe busy trying to get people in and out. All right, well, maybe if you message her, we can always hear from her. Okay. So, I mean, I think what's really one thing that I just kind of wanted to say to you guys that I didn't say is that, you know, what's interesting about I actually call it immersive production, because immersive includes both virtual reality and augmented reality. So you might hear people talking about XR as well, or extended reality, and basically extended reality, or XR, is the umbrella term for virtual reality, augmented reality, and then mixed reality. And very quickly, the difference between them is simply that with augmented reality, you're just bringing it in a 3D digital asset, you know, a piece of media, into the real world. So the classic examples of this is Pokemon Go. But also, if you think about Instagram filters, all those filters that you have, you know, that's augmented reality, because you're bringing in a little, you know, funny animation into the real world. With virtual reality, you're literally cutting off the real world and you're in a completely different world. And that's the kind of basic difference. You will hear also people talk about mixed reality, but that is essentially the same as augmented reality now. Because augmented reality has just developed so much. So you'll hear people talking about XR or extended reality, and I kind of talk about immersive production or immersive technology or immersive techniques, because there's also immersive sound, which is what, you know, Samuel's really interested in, and maybe some of you are as well. So those are kind of the terms that I might be throwing around, and hopefully that's not too difficult for you guys. But the other thing I wanted to say was that, you know, what's really interesting about this, and you'll kind of probably have gathered it from talking to everybody else, is that, you know, really the immersive techniques are being used in all kinds of areas of our lives. So, you know, it's not just in documentary or, you know, for entertainment or for gaming. It's being used for health and well-being. So, you know, it's really interesting to think about this grieving and healing idea that you have, because, you know, again, that's something that, you know, we're just discovering the power of immersive work. And there's something very particular about how the brain interprets experiences in virtual reality that is different to simply being an observer. So it enters your brain as if it's an experience. So one place that you guys might want to take a look at is the work that's being done by Stanford University's lab. They have a research lab, and they're looking at behavior change specifically, and how both virtual and augmented reality can affect behavior change. So that's definitely something, if you're interested in this area, that you should check out. But also I draw on all kinds of different genres as well now to produce my work in a way that before I had never done. So I've sort of learned about theatre and immersive theatre, because instead of sort of thinking about my scene that I might shoot or film, I'm thinking about actually creating an entire world that I want my viewer to sort of walk into or be part of, right? So that's one thing. Theatre is one area. Gaming is incredible, and it's not just because of graphics and fun things that you can do. It's actually about learning how audiences interact. So, for example, you can have branching narratives, which is something that you can have with flat screen. On the web or whatever. You can create a sort of branching narrative that way as well, but it really comes from gaming, where a branching narrative is basically where you as the viewer can choose a particular line of story that you want to follow, or you can make choices that will lead you in a particular direction. And there's ways of selecting that you might not even know about. So there's one VR experience where, as the viewer, you're not aware that you're making choices simply by looking in a particular direction. So the storyline changes depending on what you're looking at and what you're interested in, but you're not even aware of it. So that comes from gaming. So obviously film, if you're shooting 360 film as well, I mean, there's clearly techniques that I take from that. So I guess what I'm saying is, just be really open to other techniques that you might never have thought about before. And as a woman in my 50s, gaming is really not my tradition, but I've become really interested in it, because actually I've learned a lot from gaming, and it's really helped my storytelling. So that would be just one little piece of advice that I would give you guys. So, why don't we dive into the whole, the sort of community engagement side of things, because I think that's really interesting. And, you guys have been talking about it from different points of view. I know that Lisa, you're really interested in, but then Orlando as well. I thought it was really interesting that you were kind of trying to question how to be representative. So I wondered if you wouldn't mind talking a bit more about what you meant by that.
About which part of it? About the challenges?
Yeah, I think that you were talking about the challenges of making, of true representation, I think is what you were saying. So what is it that was worrying you about that, or what concerned you about creating something in virtual reality that would maybe be unrepresentative of maybe people that you're working with?
Well, I'll just give you a concrete example in terms of just like the politics of representation, where what we are working with is a installation about detention centers, immigrant detention centers in the US. And so we had we have a really cool sort of immersive multimedia installation where you kind of have the beds, but it actually moves away from it's art installation, so we're not trying to literally represent the detention center.
Mhm.
We're trying to get more at the feeling, actually. But in figuring out how to take that experience, make it virtual, I think that some of my colleagues were saying my comment about like the feel of the video game, which is that I guess it has associations with play and things like that, with something that is much more sort of serious, that is trying to represent pain and suffering, that kind of thing. But what else would I say about that? So that's kind of a challenge, and maybe that's just I haven't seen enough examples of what people have done with that. But it's the question, how do you represent pain and suffering, right? That's the question. And the other part is that I'm thinking about more now is the question of empathy. Is it that we're trying to generate empathy in our audience, and then what is that doing? What is the hope behind that? You know, that there's some critiques around that idea as being too limited, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'll leave it there.
I think that's great. That's really interesting. So when I sort of teach as well, the first thing that I say is, you know, how do you want people to feel? So what you said was absolutely what I do as well. That's where I start off. It's not necessarily, especially because a lot of the topics and the issues that I work on are really tough. So genocide is not something that you want to take somebody through, right? And I think what I've found really interesting about the different people that I've worked with more recently, and I think this is a change, you know, there's been a real change in how I work, you know, over the 20 years that I've been working, or 30 years that I've been working, my methodology has really changed. And I had this really interesting experience with a young Syrian girl that I worked with on the New Reality series in Germany, where I kind of had this idea of how, you know, she faced a lot of racism. And I said, oh, you know, what about if we do this really amazing shot where, you know, you're sitting on this step and then you have all these people around you in 360 and, you know, we hear all the things that they say to you. So that we get to experience what it was like for you, you know, creating the empathy that you're talking about. And she was absolutely furious with me and said, no, why should I have to go through that again? Like, why should I have to relive that and think about that again? I would much rather that you wrote about, you know, that we created a scene where I talk about how I feel really supported by my, you know, the female members of my extended family. And, you know, and then she said, oh God, we could have my Syrian aunts ululating. And it ended up being like a really powerful moment in that film, actually. And so it's a really interesting question that you've posed, and that certainly I've had to kind of deal with recently. But I don't know, has anyone else had to deal with that, like Lisa or John? I don't know what it's like with in Malawi. How is it there?
So we have kind of a general media policy in terms of just not showing anything that's too well, not in terms of not showing things, but in terms of that if we're representing somebody in any way, we want it to be empowering. Just because there's so many, it's so common and it's so easy to show people at, you know, at their hardest time or at their worst, or when their child is sick and they're coming to the clinic. And that's not the picture of themselves, you know, either the actual picture or the, you know, descriptive picture of themselves or their child that they want anybody to really imagine them as. So we'll have, once again, this can be multimedia, but generally we'll have more of kind of a discussion up to that point, and then the rising from the ashes, right? The coming away from that, like how did this mother end up helping her child? How was our medical team able to do this? How did this woman rise herself out of poverty by, you know, by working hard and having her own small business, right? So yeah, that's definitely in our like immersive stuff, we avoid that as we wouldn't do it, but we always try to just make everything be very uplifting. And of course, you know, then there's this side of, oh, well, isn't that kind of, you know, you're not giving the full story. Yeah, but if you ask the people what they actually want, they don't want you to have the full story, because who are you? Why would you, the viewer, or whoever the viewer is, deserve to have that part of their story that might only be reserved for their most intimate connections, or yeah.
Yeah, cool. And Lisa, what about you?
Yeah, it just brought to mind a couple of examples. We spent 12 weeks and treated it like a job, going, you know, at least 3 times a week to the estate and getting to know lots of the residents. And, you know, when Michael was talking, it brought to mind that in our research stage, we got to know a lot of the residents and the caretaker and community leaders quite a bit, and they told us some very personal information. For example, you know, one of the residents was talking about the daughter who had learning difficulties, and you know, it was very difficult at home. And when we brought the big cameras in and did, you know, the formal interview, and we asked the same questions, it was quite obvious that this person did not want to reveal that side of their lives on film, because I suppose there was the realization that this was for an audience. And, you know, from the beginning, we said that we wanted, you know, to put underrepresented groups on screen, but also underrepresented groups to use VR. And, you know, for many of them, it was the first time that they saw themselves, you know, with the headset on when we did the screening. And I suppose, you know, it happens in, you know, any filming, not just immersive applications or VR. You know, we've all got an ethical responsibility as to how we show people on film. One of the elderly ladies was telling me that she got on very well with her foreign neighbours, but she didn't like the smell of their cooking. She thought it was disgusting. And as a team, we really talked about, you know, whether we put this on screen, but ultimately I felt I had an ethical responsibility towards her, because of course, you know, her neighbours would be watching this piece with her, and they may adjust their feelings about her. And because she's an elderly lady living on her own, I took the editorial decision to take that out of the piece, because you know, I felt there would be consequences for her. And I don't think she, you know, she got on very well with her neighbours. She just unfortunately happened to say something that was a little bit unkind. Yeah, they're the only 2 examples I can think of. Yeah.
So, and Claire, what do you with you know, with the work that you're doing, how kind of does this relate to what you're doing in terms of representation in particular?
Yeah, it's an interesting balance, I think, between this like making visible stories that might have been erased in the past, and also like not wanting to play too much into this thing of giving the viewer the experience of like what it feels like to be a person, or what it feels like to have this thing. And I think that's something that we struggle with a lot and try to think through often, is like what how are you positioning the narrative in the way that you are also understanding the limits, that you don't get the embodied experience of having an identity other than your own, and all of the things that come along with that, and also, yeah, and wanting to like mobilize the embodied experience of having a narrative that is not your own in the right way, in a way that is limited, that is like offering a bit of insight, or maybe can be like an on-ramp onto discussion, but isn't sort of claiming this, like, I'm walking in your shoes, or I'm entirely occupying your body and your position.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was just going to say. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting, and again, you know, the way that people talk about virtual reality in particular as an empathy machine. I'm sure you guys have heard about that. It's actually quite controversial within our community because it's one of those words, a bit like the metaverse, that has sort of taken a life of its own. It's like the sort of mainstream grab hold of these words and then sort of run with it, or people maybe, you know, suddenly think that it means something because a particular person has said it, in the case of Zuckerberg and metaverse. But the empathy machine was a term coined by a guy called Chris Milk. And I mean, for a start, what a horrible expression. Anyway, like the empathy machine just doesn't make sense, does it really? But anyway, it's really interesting, this idea that we all, you know, have, and that people sort of sell virtual reality as walking in someone else's shoes, you know, exactly what you were saying, which is really interesting. It's like, okay, you know, do you really want to walk in the shoes of, you know, a population where they're family members have been murdered? I mean, no, you don't really want to walk in their shoes. So, but yet, how do you sort of show, you know, tell the story and show the experience? You know, and I think it's really important because in terms of representation, you know, for example, I know that there's a lot of, I know there's a VR experience being made actually about the Atlanta, what they call race riots. And because that story is only really being told from this sort of you know, white perspective, basically, and so it's really interesting to now have this other perspective being told, and this other side of the story that actually we haven't heard of. Or, you know, in the States, you know, Claire, like the Indigenous experience is just something that you know, is really kind of rare to hear about, actually. Even, I mean, I'm sure now more, but you know, I've spent a lot of time in America, and it was only really this time when I was just there a few months ago. It's the first time I've heard people doing land acknowledgement. I didn't even know what was happening, because I'd never heard that before, and I was like, what are they saying, you know? You know, that's really fascinating, that it's that you know, hopefully that we are hearing more about those stories, and there is an acknowledgement of you know, the land and obviously the resources as well. So, you know, I think that I wondered if I should sort of also talk to you guys a little bit about how I approach that community engagement as well, because I think that was another area. And I mean, I'm sure it's not that different to what you do either, you know, but you know, like you, I would just go through local NGOs always. And you know, certainly when I was in Venezuela and Colombia, I would go through the local churches as well. So it was often the local priest who was also working with the local community. But I guess what's different about my approach now is that as I said, is that I kind of maybe research the various stories. So I'll sort of be working with a local organization and be talking to them about what they think are the kind of issues and areas I should talk about in whatever the experience is. Or, you know, for example, with the Yazidis, this was a really interesting project because they've had to tell their story so many times that it's actually really traumatic to sort of go over and over again telling your story. And there's actually lots of stories out there in the public domain. So I kind of took this decision to not just tell one person's story, which I've never done before. I always, you know, because I said in the past that I've always sort of, I've rarely used a narrative. I've rarely had a narrator. So it's always just, you know, taken from interviews. Whatever the voices that you're hearing, it will be from whoever it is that I'm talking to. You never hear my voice, you'll never hear anyone else's voice. And so it's a kind of weird thing for me to do, to kind of create a composite character, because I felt like, well, then I was kind of imposing my view. It's already becoming a little bit subjective. But I was kind of balancing that with sort of, interviewing some Yazidi women in particular who, have just been through really horrendous experiences and already spoken about it. So what I did was I went over lots of testimonies and used exact wording, rather than, I didn't create any sentences myself. So I used exact wording to try and create a storyline. And it was actually about one village called Kocho village, which is where Nadia Murad is from. And, I was trying to sort of recreate what happened that night. And you sort of hear from the perspective, it's a branching narrative, so you can choose whose perspective you listen to, whether it's a young Yazidi woman, a Yazidi man who survives a massacre. And then I also included an ISIS fighter. And so that was also quite an interesting decision, which I'll talk about in a second. But what I then did was, so I brought together a narrative that I thought could work. And then I had a workshop with some Yazidi survivors, and I got them to read what I had pulled together to help me work out whether it sounded realistic, or whether it was too difficult to listen to, or and so that's kind of how I sort of tried to make sure that it was authentic, basically. And it was kind of interesting because I also sent it to some researchers from those huge, organizations like Human Rights Watch, another international lawyer who had done a lot of work with Yazidis, just again to make sure that what I was creating sounded real and authentic. What was really interesting was that there were some of the human rights researchers were not happy with the fact that I'd included an ISIS fighter. Whereas actually the Yazidis themselves were not, they really wanted it. They said that, it was important to hear that and to hear about who they were as part of the story. So that was kind of one methodology that I hadn't used before, as I said. And usually what I'll do, this is much more common, that I will go through an NGO, talk to them about, different it's usually young people actually that I work with, but, different characters. And then I go and chat to them. And then, so now with technology, actually, often the first time I talk to them is over Zoom or, a phone call, and I'll kind of flesh out their story a bit. And then I go back to them and I talk about what I think the story is about, and we kind of discuss it together. And that's that point where I also talk about what I think we should shoot visually, as well as what the narrative would be. And we kind of go through it together and decide what they're happy with and what they're not happy with. And I did that right from the beginning with VR. So that film in Sierra Leone was I think one of the first times that I really did that properly. And it was really important because there is sometimes language that people use. So for example, Mami, the woman that I was working with, she used this word where she said, my father called me a girl of the street. And, that could mean lots of, it could mean you're either, a sex worker or you're homeless, so it was really important to sort of be able to work with her to actually clarify what she meant by that, rather than just make an assumption. And then, as I said, with the visuals as well, it just sort of, it's also really important to me that the characters feel represented, in the way that they want to be represented. But of course, it also has issues, like sometimes, So for example, I was doing this as part of that New Reality series. There was a really amazing story about a young Italian woman whose dad was from the Côte d'Ivoire, and she'd set up this brilliant app for refugees called Migrants, and it basically was an app that refugees could download, and it would tell them about their rights, it would tell them how they could learn Italian. It was, you know, some really brilliant things. And she was this great businesswoman. She was really happy with everything that I'd done. But in the narrative, she really wanted to put statistics into her narrative. And, you know, as a documentary filmmaker, I can put some stats in there, but not that many for the audience, because there's only so much you can listen to. And so that was, you know, sometimes you're going to have pulls, and I had to then try and explain to her my knowledge and my experience. And there is a level of professionalism that we bring, you know, in our specialist areas, right? Yeah, that's just also, sometimes it can be difficult to get that balance right, you know. John, have you got a question? I think you're on mute. Oh.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I wanted to bring in, and I don't know if this is the right time for this, but I was just kind of hoping to give a bit of like another possible perspective on this, on like how to strategize this storytelling. Something that we're planning on doing this year is really shifting it more towards, instead of it being direct documentary and having the people, you know, like on camera telling the story, we're trying to make it more, not directly fictional, but quasi-fictional. And the route towards taking that is I am connecting with a local Malawian storyteller, and trying to just work with her and say, okay, I'm gonna try and plan this out and how, like, show you how do we write the story, right, so that we can use it for this production. But I'm basically just saying, hey, like, write this story, you know, and then she'll have, you know, credits on the final production. She'll have, you know, her name, and that I don't know if she wants to be a screenwriter, but it will certainly literally put her name somewhere to be recognized, and also she'll have this amazing learning opportunity in terms of actually being able to kind of produce this story. And then as she's writing that, then we're going to try to start kind of filming around these things, if that, and like kind of building the experience kind of around this story that I'm pretty much just putting in her hands and saying like, hey, what do you think? With very little restrictions. So that's just kind of a perspective on.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that. I really do. I think that's definitely, it's something that I did more with 16:9 shoots. It's a little bit more difficult, I have found, with VR, only because what I used to do before I started doing VR was I used to go and actually do some training in wherever I was going. So I would train up the young people that I was working with. So not only were they also, you know, characters in the film, but they were also learning how to film. You know, that was great. That worked really well. And nowadays, especially because technology again has just moved on so much, even from 2015, you know, actually it's really possible to create, for them to create their own work. Does anybody have a question that they want to ask? Like, I don't want to kind of dictate completely which direction we go in. I want to make sure that you all get your questions answered. Do you have any questions?
I just wanted to bring up the idea to ask you all how you're feeling right now. If you want to take a break, or we have a little bit over half an hour. If you want, we just continue through, or we take a 5-minute break. How's everybody feeling?
Everyone
We
okay?
continue? All right, let's go.
That's cool. Okay, what about talking now?
Sorry,
Yeah.
I have a question about you know, the distribution and exhibition of the final product.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think we've spoken quite broadly about, you know, on-screen representation, but I think, you know, it's really important, just as any, you know, 2D film that we produce, that the audience see themselves, and that, you know, that the distribution and circulation of the product is planned quite carefully, which is always overlooked at the beginning of a project. And I just wondered, you know, how you think about this at the beginning of a project.
I mean, that's huge now. You know, there are kind of a couple of things that I'm thinking about. So one, I think it's really important that the people who are in the films or in the experiences also get to experience them. So there's another project I've been working on that you might be interested in, Lisa, because it's in London too, which is working with, I live in Brixton, so it's working with the local community here, the sort of West Indian community in particular. I mentored a group of them to make a 360 film, just a local community group, and it was all about, you know, the Black experience of Brixton, basically. And what was really important was that we then showed it here as well, right? And so that, you know, the Black community could also enjoy it. It's not something that's just on the Oculus Quest, that those of us that can afford the £300 for one can watch. So it was shown here in Brixton Library. And that's something that I think is really interesting. And in the States as well. So what I've been looking at in the US in particular is also how to make sure that the people who are creating VR are not just, you know, one particular demographic. And so, you know, and we're creating this master's program. So, you know, we all know how expensive it is in the States to go to university to study, and particularly a master's. So, you know, we're trying to look into scholarships and that sort of thing, but it's also about how you reach out to people. So it's that kind of outreach. So again, for that, what we're doing is going through local community groups. You know, youth groups working with young people that have been incarcerated, homeless groups, you know, but what we've also discovered is that actually one of the places that people go to who don't have technology are, again, public libraries. So that's, again, where we thought that we might, you know, do some little boot camps to sort of, you know, that are free for the local community, to try and get people to start thinking about VR and becoming involved in it and creating it for themselves. So it's through, I think libraries is a massive, you know, that's a massive resource for reaching out to people who wouldn't normally be able to use, you know, an expensive headset. I mean, apart from that, then obviously we kind of try and get distribution now through, you know, other, you know, event spaces or whatever. So it depends on the community and what the experience is. So, for example, with one of the things that I'm working on, it's about these clubs called Shabeens. I don't know if you know about them, and they were set up by the Black community as safe spaces. You know, particularly in I think it started off in the sort of 50s and 60s, but through the 80s in particular, they were really popular. And so we might sort of therefore show that experience in somewhere like the local Domino's club. You know, they've got a big Domino's club down here. So again, it's just working out where the people are who might not have access to a headset.
Yeah, one of the barriers that I've come across, our local archive museum in the borough where I live, were very keen to, you know, keep this on file, but of course then you've got the question of the maintenance of the headset, somebody who can charge it up, clean it, you know, in this COVID times. So that has been a barrier, and my reaction to that is to produce more work so that, you know, it becomes more profitable, you know, if there's more experience about this local area and made by local people, you know, as you say, you know, training up young people to get into the industry who are from underrepresented groups. So that's really important to me also.
Yeah, and I think it's just making an effort to go out and change how you do your outreach, you know, and maybe it's through schools or local community colleges, you know, it's not going through, you know, Talent Manager, which for you guys who aren't British is like a, you know, it's a website that you can go to hire people for TV production, basically. So, you know, don't go through that. You know, work out where people, you know, from other groups are, you know, where are they online? What blogs are they looking at? There's a blog called Brixton Blog, you know, that's what the local community watch, you know, they follow that. But also it's to actually just encourage people too. I mean, what was kind of interesting about this community project I worked on, I was just asked to come and mentor them in 360 film. And what was really interesting is that it was, you know, people from all kinds of backgrounds, you know, people doing all different things and all different ages. And actually one of the women in the group, she sort of had done a bit of sound recording, and she actually had a big sound system that she ran with her sisters, or runs with her sisters. And now she and I are sort of co-directing the Underground Club experience together. She got so into it, into VR, that she now has sort of got a bit of funding for that. And actually we're probably not going to co-direct it. I think, you know, I want her to just direct it now. And I think that she, you know, enough times past, she now thinks that she can do it. So that's great, you know, and what she wants to do is involve, you know, the community in creating that experience as well. So, you know, it's kind of just trying to build those areas up and those contacts up, I guess, as well. And it does take time and effort, as you say, and also money. I mean, again, you know, I think the thing that I found about the States that's different is that there's a culture of that sponsorship as well, that we could probably do a bit more with in the UK, and getting those tech companies to, you know, just give you 10 free headsets, or, you know, to sort of sponsor one person to, you know, to learn how to use game engines, to go on a boot camp or whatever. And so, you know, and I think that there feels like there's an interesting openness in the immersive world at the moment to trying to build a different culture. And obviously we have our, you know, tasks, the task is laid out for us by Zuckerberg and those people, because, you know, they've realized how powerful it is and how exciting it is, and they're investing a lot of money in it. But, you know, they're not all, that's not all bad. You know, on the one hand, they now people are talking about the metaverse, people are talking about virtual reality in a way that they weren't, you know, before he started talking about the metaverse. And also, you know, they're putting a lot of money into Meta, and also they appear to be anyway keen to also be giving money to good causes, let's say. So, you know, there are particular grants. There's a grant called Unity for Humanity, and Unity is one of the two main game engine developers. And they're really worth exploring if any of you are interested in that. There's Unity for Humanity, and then Unreal, the other game engine, they also give out grants, you know, for projects that they think are interesting. And, you know, it's always worth having a go. Like, I would absolutely say to, you know, have a go on any of this stuff, because really there aren't that many people in this industry yet. So, you know, it's not hugely competitive in terms of seeking grants, for example. So, is there any other questions that you guys have? Go for it, Shirley.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could say something about kind of the process that you go through in creating any kind of immersive experience, especially in relation to the more traditional documentary making you've done? So what are other considerations that come into play? And then secondly, just very banal, like how do you make it? Like how?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, again, one of my notes here I had down is to sort of say to you guys, you know, why immersive? Like, why do you want to, you know, why have you chosen this particular format to you know, convey whatever it is, or to explore what you guys are exploring? So, you know, there has to be a kind of a reason for it, as anything. You know, it's like, why make a film rather than write you know, a blog? I mean, I think for me, you know, the major consideration is and I prefer, if I'm going to be honest and say, I prefer virtual reality to augmented reality, simply because I feel it's more powerful as a storytelling tool. But having said that, you know, for example, if you know, if the objective was to get as many people as possible to you know, to hear a few oral histories from you know, the local community in Brixton, and we only had £20,000 to make it, then I would really consider making an augmented reality experience. You know, because it's quite a good way of maybe following a trail or a journey, because all you do is, you know, scan a QR, like a QR code basically is what it is, although it's something slightly different. You know, you might go past a particular building, you could scan it, and then you might hear somebody's story, and you could see, you know, it could just be a little video that is triggered. So, you know, it is kind of cool that I do think those are kind of interesting. But I tend to choose VR because I guess I think it's more powerful to sort of take you out of your world and into someone else's. So in terms of what's different, the major consideration is, you know, what am I trying to convey overall in the, you know, so I'm like, okay, well, what's the overall story? What overall do I want people to feel at the end of this? And it might be something quite simple, like I want them to feel like this girl is powerful. So ultimately that might be the overriding feeling that I want, because that's what I felt from her when I was talking to her, let's say. And then I sort of break down each scene, and, you know, you then work out, okay, well, what do you want to feel from each of those different scenes, or what are the important parts of that story? And then what's different is that instead of sort of creating, you know, a sequence about, you know, a part of the narrative, you actually create a world. So that's what you're doing. You're creating a world for them, for the audience, okay? And then the next stage from that is, okay, well, how do I want to create that world? Do I want to simply create a 360 film, which is, you know, filmed with a 360 camera? And the reason I like 360 film is that it's photoreal. So when you are in, you know, when you put the headset on, you can look around and you feel like you're there because it looks photoreal. And also I come from a film now, you know, tradition, so I kind of tend to prefer that. The downside of 360 film is that you can't, as the viewer, you can't dictate what happens in the scene, okay? So you don't have what we call agency to interact with the scene. So, and if I created it in a game engine, you would be able to explore the scene completely. Do you understand what I'm meaning? Did I explain that okay? So in a game engine, it's a three-dimensional environment. that's all around you. And you can sort of look behind your computer and you would see behind it, okay? Whereas a 360 film, you don't. You just see, you know, what I, as the director, have recorded or captured, I should say. So what's interesting about both of these methods is that they're developing all the time. So a 360 film, there are companies that are sort of exploring how you can actually make it, you know, properly three-dimensional, or what we call 6 degrees of freedom, where you can actually look behind objects. But it's not quite there yet. With creating a 3D environment using game engines, that's also developing. So you can, they look more and more photoreal as we, you know, as time goes on. Basically, they're developing at a really fast rate. So more recently, I've been using game engine environments because I've kind of wanted my viewers to be able to interact with the scene. So that might mean, you know, just simply making a choice about which screen they want to view, for example. Or, you know, with the Yacidi one, it was like, which of these stories do you want to hear? And you could go back and hear all of them, but, you know, which one do you want to hear? And you make a selection. You know, with one of the experiences I'm looking at the moment, you know, you can pick up an object and actually look at it. So for example, you know, you can look at somebody's documentation or old photographs, let's say, and bring them sort of close to you to sort of have a closer look. So it kind of depends on what you want from the experience. So how much interactivity do you want? That's quite an important sort of question I ask myself. Obviously, how much money you've got as well, because interactivity is really expensive. It's much more expensive than just shooting a 360 film. So yeah, that's the sort of process I go through. But, you know, just a couple of other things to think about. You know, sound is huge for me in a way that's different to regular filmmaking. So it was always important to me, no matter what, you know, I always had a, you know, a soundtrack, but now I actually use sound to direct the viewer. So I'll have a 360 soundscape, you know, I'll have something making a sound over here to make you look around there. And that was really exciting for me. I think it's huge and very different to the way that I made 16:9 films, or flatties, as we call them as well. And you know, being able to kind of create the world sonically is, you can't underestimate it, really. I mean, there's a very famous experience that you guys should watch if you haven't, called Notes on Blindness. And it's really interesting. It's about a guy who loses his sight. So it's a documentary, it's actually a series. You're listening to his, you know, he recorded his, like a diary, basically, his voice. So you're listening to him talking. And the imagery, so it's basically a sort of all black environment, and then just these really sort of faint lights of animations that sort of depict a little bit what he's talking about. So if he's talking about a rabbit, you see a little rabbit, and, you know, he's in the park, so you see some trees, but it's very abstract, and it really doesn't matter. You sort of, and in a way it really goes with the story, right? Because it's about blindness and going blind. So you're not seeing a lot visually. And, you know, so yeah, so sound is definitely something that's huge for me as well. But I'd say the major difference is that I think about creating a world as opposed to just setting a scene, let's say, or creating a sequence. It's that you're literally creating a world for your audience to enter into, so that they feel like they were there. Does that answer your question? Cool. Any other questions? Yeah, go for it.
Again, sorry with my just brutally mundane questions here. So there are a lot of PhD students listening. How expensive is this equipment? Like, so let's say we just wanted to make a 360 film. Is there anything in the price range like that a PhD student could actually afford to make this sort of film?
Yeah, you can buy a really good, there's a camera called a Gopro Max, which is about £400, which I think is reasonable. I don't think it's that long since I've been a student, or maybe it is actually, but so £400 gets you a really good camera. I use the Gopro Max in my, in my work. They're I think they're 4K, they might even do 8K now. So very, very good cameras. I can see John's also put the Insta360. I think the sort of Pro is a bit more, it's probably more like £2,000, something like that. So that's probably out of that range. But I would definitely start with something like the GoPro. There's a Fusion, which was the one before, and it's now called a Max. There's also another one called a QCam. But they're all around that kind of price, like £300 or £400. So for a 360 film, that's that's not bad, really. And then you can edit in Premiere Pro. I think people edit in I think you can also do it in Final Cut, but most people I know use Premiere Pro now. So again, not that much. Oh, that's good. So Raphael is saying that there's actually, oh, that's cool. Your university will maybe give you grants for that equipment.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, I suppose different universities have got different kinds of budgets as well. But, I think that there is, this is such an exciting, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you, because it's such an exciting kind of topic. It's so interesting to kind of see how really, the technologies, but the interest and the kind of enthusiasm for it can really change the way in which academia is done. It can really change the way in which research is done, and I think that changes the kinds of relationships that we can have with our participants, and I think, and it opens up a whole new kind of range of audiences who normally wouldn't be interested in reading an academic paper, but might absolutely love being immersed in these environments. And I think universities are kind of seeing the importance of this as well. And so we asked UCL for some support to buy a camera, and I'm sure other universities will have little support systems in place as well to help reach more people.
And I think it was it Esgy or Beryl, one of you guys said that you just didn't want to write ever again. Okay, Esgy, yeah. And do you have equipment at all, Esgy?
Hi. When I was filming, I had no equipment whatsoever. So I had my friend's camera. I just bought a tripod, and I was walking around the parks and interviewing people about my research, and I was buying lunch to a documentary film student, and she was giving me her UCL card so I could access to the computers, and I did learn Premiere Pro by YouTube videos. I did the film at the end. Yeah.
So Danny as well, that's the other thing, like if you're, there are so many tutorials now, and again, in the resources list that I've got for you guys as well, you can actually learn how to use Unity online, and actually I would really discourage you from ever going to, to a training on that, because there's so much online that's free. And as I said, there's still like this kind of community feeling. So if you join, let's say, the Unity community, you can ask questions and everybody helps you. So it's really interesting. It's still quite small and welcoming in that sense as well. And yeah, I'm glad, thanks Rafaela for putting that in. So you can get ambisonic microphones as well. And also if you wanted to, you can record different sound beds. So before we had, the ambisonic mics, what I used to do with my films was just set a bunch of you know, recorders in different places. And then, you know, you work out more or less where they are, and then you tell your sound designer where to place those. So there's ways of doing it cheaply too, but you just have to learn how to do it, Danny. But, you know, they just need to learn online, and going to YouTube tutorials is like, that's it. Unless you want to come and do a master's with me, obviously.
I know where to send my students.
Exactly. And Beryl, I wanted to ask you, because I thought it was really interesting what you were saying about, you know, using VR for cultural purposes and for oral histories. That I was kind of thinking about that. So have you done some already? Have you already created some VR experiences, or you're interested in doing it?
Unfortunately not, because like I don't have the fundings or necessary equipment to do it. So I'm currently like just like exploring and reading about it. But what gave me an idea, when I'm talking or interviewing with my friends that come from Syria, that they're always like talking about like their streets, the way that like the way that like they're missing it, and I feel like we are losing that essence, and they're never able to like pass that to the next generation. And my experiences from a eastern village called Malatya, and we have some Armenian heritage in the family. And when I'm talking with Armenian families from Malatya, that like they're always like say that like the streets were different. The way that like we were walking on those streets were completely different. But after the military coup in the 80s, they completely ruined the streets and they changed it, and the demographic starts to change as well, because all the streets were like they're always like going to the church, and you were like gathering every Sunday and you were praying. Now all the essence is gone, and they block the streets, or they were like, it's more like a parallel street now. And I found that like very interesting, because when you're like telling this, it's like a fairy tale, you know, like something is happening in ancient time, but it's only like a 20 years away from today. And also like when I'm seeing my friends are talking about their cultural heritages, like from Palmyra or from Aleppo, from Damascus, they were there like 10 years ago, and now we're like losing that essence. And probably in 15 years, we're gonna see some of the pieces in some of the museums, but it will never be the same. And I feel like with VR or with the emerging, like with the new technologies, like you can recreate this, we can recreate the sense, and also like the next generations can benefit from their experiences, and they can like understand their culture in more detail. Yeah.
So sometimes, and I think this is also something that was kind of interesting about what Orlando was saying, is, you know, you don't have to kind of recreate something exactly as it was, you know. There might just be something you know, that gives a sense of what it was, you know, I don't know, whatever it is that you're trying to convey. So, you know, with detention, it might be that you know, people feel like their walls are just tiny and they're closing in, or, you know, it's really suffocating or claustrophobic, or I don't know, you know, or it's isolating. So in a sense, that's where I would kind of start, is like, what's the feeling that they are having that you then want to convey, you know, and then you can build out from there. And it's maybe the same with what you're talking about as well, Beryl, where you know, there are snapshots of people trying to remember a street, you know, and how would they try and recreate that, you know, and you can't go back to that street, I presume, because it's in Syria right now, or you know, so maybe what is it that they remember? Maybe there's you know, a particular shop or a particular sound, then you can use the sound to kind of recreate that moment. So it's sometimes about trying to also get the you know, some real details as well, so you dig even deeper in to be able to kind of you know, find an even more human part of the story. So, I mean, I'll give you another example. I'm working on another film and experience at the moment, which is about a Holocaust survivor from the Netherlands. And I just, you know, she was talking about lots of different things. And you know, I was trying to sort of think about like she was talking about when they were made to wear the star, and you know, they were all given 3 stars, and you had to sew it on to, you know, an outer bit of clothing and in a bit of clothing. And like, you know, it was, who sewed those? How did that happen? And maybe there's nothing in that, but I'm just giving you an example of what I would do, is that I'll just, you know, and how significant was that? And maybe it wasn't. You know, she was talking about a particular moment when she was 5, and her uncles had made they did a Punch and Judy show for her, and it was her 5th birthday. And that was, you know, her family used to always get together, and this was one of those moments. So that would be a moment that I would probably try and somehow recreate, but not by recreating exactly a Punch and Judy show, you know what I mean? You just might use the sound, let's say, or you know, I might use a slight sort of animation around a 360 film, because I have to, there's a limitation on this, they want 360 films. So then I might think, okay, well, what can I do to animate the 360 scene to kind of bring it to life a little bit? And it might just be something quite abstract, like a little girl sitting down or laughing, or I don't know, you know. So that's kind of what I'm meaning, is that you can sometimes just take an object or a moment that will actually convey something that's actually very powerful, and it's really quite small. You don't have to tell every single part of the story. I'll give you another example just because it's jumped into my head, which was in the story about the Yazidis. This woman spoke about how they used to watch telly at night, and her mum used to brush her hair for her while she was watching television. And I thought that's just a scene that could be in any country in the world. And especially Yazidis are so sort of ostracized, and people think, you know, that they're a cult, or, you know, they have quite a, you know, a reputation for being really odd. And actually they're not, they're just like us, you know. And so for me, that was a really common thing that I wanted to bring in, to just show how, you know, how like us they were, which is just, you know, a very common thing that we would all do, sit and watch. You know, who knew that the Yazidis had TVs? People thought they were anti-television and they didn't have electricity, and, you know, and actually, of course they did. They were fine, and they were middle class, you know. So, you know, that's the sort of thing that I would do, is just try and find little moments like that obviously resonate for you too. I'm aware that we're running out of time, but have you got another question, Shirley?
I do, but I've asked questions already, so if there's anybody else who wants to jump in, that's also okay. No, everybody good. I just wanted to ask you about branching narratives, because I actually wanted to use that in the game that I'm making as well. I just didn't know it was called branching narratives. And I wondered, like, you talked about it as, you know, doing it from having different perspectives on the same event, but what about having actual different pathways? You know, so how do you have like maybe some resources that I could look at, or do you have like methods or tips or ways to kind of like, how do you construct that? How do you think about it? Because obviously in a way you're making lots of sequences and putting them, you know, it's a bit complicated.
Yeah, and I mean, I think again, you have to think about cost, because if you're going to have lots of different branching narratives, what visuals are you going to have at the same time? So if you're going to have different visuals, that might cost money. So, or, you know, what's the point of the branching narrative? Do you want, you know, will everybody come around to the same place at the end? Or, you know, is there a way to come back and join? You know, is it a game, let's say, and there's a right path or a wrong path, or is it just a different path? And you know, so I guess that's what you kind of have to think about, really, is you know, why the branching narrative for a start, but you know, what purpose it serves. Yeah, so is it an escape room, and is there more than one place to escape to, or but yeah, I can find something that can, I'll find something for you. They'll that I can recommend. I'll add it to the resources list that I send to you. So, anything else? Okay, well, look, I'm so happy to have spoken to you all, and please, you're very welcome to reach out to me. You know, if you want more advice, or if you want to get involved and you know, join the community, follow people on Twitter. You know, be bold and be brave, because it's a really great space to be in, and you know, why not you? Why shouldn't you be involved?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mary. I'll say, just as a closing comment, and maybe as a reply to Izgi's concern about writing, we in the Manchester PhD, we have the space to produce what you call, I love this name, the flatty. But we don't have the resources, or it's not up to date with all these new technologies that you're telling us about. And I think that's what makes this masterclass so fascinating, because to my knowledge, this is the place where these conversations are being had. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining, and I hope that we can continue this conversation. The masterclass that is recorded is going to be posted on the MAL website. And maybe, Rafaela, do you want to say something quickly about MAL? Maybe if Mary, you want to say anything else. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mary.
No, I was just gonna, no, not at all, not at all. No, thank you all for coming, and I'll see you in the metaverse.
A big thank you to you, Mary, really, for for being here today, but also for pioneering this and for being really at the forefront and inspiring others, and doing such fantastic work. I think it's so important, and it's an honour really to have had this shared space. I think, yeah, I mean, I guess about MAL, and that's really part of very much what inspired us to start MAL in the first place. We started back in 2017 with an inspiration inspired by wanting to shake up the tools and methods through which we can make anthropology, through anthropology, and also how that anthropology is shared with others, and how people can experience anthropology, and kind of broadening up that sphere of possibility in that audience. And so it's great to meet professionals like you who have been really leading the way. And so yeah, thank you.
Thank you.